Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show we're talking about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Narco-Saints, a great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we kind of get that, I guess, that fast forward where it's like, okay, this is Ingu at the end of his story, or maybe in the middle of it, but then we kind of rewind, get to understand his backstory, understand how where this all started, kind of understanding that his father was in the Vietnam War and then came back, and he was trying to do everything he can to make ends meet for his wife, for his 3 children. But and I think just based on I'm not well versed, once I've said time and time again, about Korean culture, but especially just like how things are in Korea, and like how obviously Squid Games kind of, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes to kind of like how things kind of work in Korea, just like that disparagement between the rich and poor, and just like kind of living day by day trying to make ends meet in some regards. That is very, once again, I could be 100% talking from ignorance, but I'm just basing this on TV shows, but and this one in particular, that kind of reigns very true for Inku, because his mom died after, like, because his mom and dad did what they could. They worked tirelessly. He even said like his dad was working 20 hours a day for like 6 years, and it just eventually his body just like gave out and wore out. But it's like, you have to do whatever you can to make ends meet, pay off debts, because his mom like dropped dead like in the middle of one of her yogurt deliveries, and he's like, yeah, like it took 3 hours for anyone to find him, and him and his siblings shed so many tears, but he's like, I never saw my dad shed a single one. And later on he's like, now I finally realized why my dad was so like, he had no time to be sad. There was no, like, the world kind of beats you down a little bit, and kind of like all your energy of all that sadness, you're just trying to make ends meet. You don't have time to be sad. And so in quick succession, to lose their mom and then their dad like that, and it became up to Ingu to be the one to kind of take care of everyone. He's the one that kind of hustled, doing different jobs here and there, making ends meet, taking care of his siblings. And eventually, to the point, it's not sustainable. He's going to burn himself out this way. So what does he do? He hits up all the girls that potentially like him. And it's like, he's trying, and they're like, wait, he's like, a condo? It's like, no, like, we could find like a house or something. But he's trying to like marry any person he can, like any girl that he's met that potentially likes him, just for the sake of trying to make enough money to make ends meet. Like, the fact is, and that's kind of sad, you're not marrying for love. It is, it's just the practicality of, if we're married, that means like there could be more income coming into the household and stuff like that. So he found someone who accepted it. We later on find out her name's is it Hyejin? It's like, right, on accepting his proposal, he has to kind of go to church like every Sunday. It's kind of, so, because she does seem like the very religious person in the family, so I guess she just naturally comes from a very religious family. I don't know if that's something that's really prevalent in Korean culture, like being like I mean, I'm sure, like, obviously it goes from person to person, but I'm wondering, as a general whole, is like in like South Korea in particular, is it really like is it overall speaking, like on average, is it like a more like religious nation than others? Like, are more Koreans more likely to be like religious than not? I'm wondering. They ended up getting their own house, but the problem is you had to get a loan to make that happen, and then that's just even more debt you kind of have to work off. And obviously, Ingu got some nice like businesses run for himself. He ended up kind of taking over like the place, the karaoke like bar or whatever that he was working at. He ended up eventually coming to own the place. And so it's like, yeah, it's like nice to be in a managerial position and stuff like that and owning stuff, but it just wasn't enough to kind of get them out of this cycle, because Ingu didn't want to repeat the cycle of his parents. He's like, he saw what happened to his parents. They worked themselves to death, and he doesn't want that. He wants to be able to provide a stable life for his family, so that his children never have to grow up like having to work tirelessly like him. It's just an endless cycle. Like, cool, my parents worked themselves to death. I find myself working myself to death, and my kids will work themselves to death, and my kids' kid, and so forth. It's like he's trying to break that cycle for his family, so that there's the whole thing is like, right, you want your kids to have a better situation than you did. You want to make it a little easier for every generation to some extent. So his buddy, Youngsu, I'm always, once again, I'm like probably horrendous when it comes to pronouncing like Korean names, but I'm just gonna say Youngsu. His buddy, because I thought that was interesting. The whole Ingu went to judo, and it was something that he really latched onto, because it was also like, right, when you were there, you were able to get snacks. Probably couldn't, like, there wasn't a lot of food available with like his family working and barely making ends meet, so it was like a guaranteed meal type of situation. But he eventually had to quit just because it's like, right, I had to take care of my family, especially after his mom and dad died. But, we do see later on in the episode that judo comes in super handy. It's like, right, he might not probably be as well versed as he used to be because he didn't continue it, but a lot of those fundamentals probably still exist because it allows you to kind of defend yourself. But either way, putting all that aside, I love the whole, his friend, Youngsu, like, popping up, being like, hey, I have a proposition for you. I'm going to tell you about this business. I guess because they were friends. Because I'm like, it's so interesting that he would come to you about it. But maybe he's like, you're smart enough and business savvy enough. I know that you would be able to do something with it. Because he is very savvy and very quick up on, like, you know, taking advantage of certain situations. Like, there is like a U.S. Army base there. And so he had a dealing with the U.S. Army base there. He even learned English just to kind of like, you know, compensate for that. Because he was like selling onions and stuff like that. Like, once again, your boy Ingu was like hustling from left and right. And so, but Youngsu brings up the fact is like, hey, there's these skates. They're obviously a pretty popular thing in Korea, like a, you know, food wise. But the thing is, they're Chilean, so they're imported from Chile. But it's so expensive that even in Chile, like importing them would like be a whole like expensive venture. So Youngsu is saying like there's a small country called, it's either Suriname or Suriname. Once again, me and my terrible pronunciations, that they just toss it out because they think it's like, oh, it's weird and gross, and it's just like, I mean, it's just, I think like it's like delicacies from many other countries. It's like, right, like a delicacy and you know, what is considered like very like cool food in one case is kind of looked down upon. I mean, at one point in time, like, you know, even like seafood was considered, like even like crab and stuff like that was considered like quote unquote poor people food because it was, because they're bottom feeders. So I think it's kind of probably just like it's just not seen the same way there as it is in Korea. So it's like, right, if we could get those things on the super cheap in Suriname, we can bring it back here and make like a killing here in Korea. And he brings this to his wife, but his wife's like, no, like, our life is fine the way it is. I don't want you going off and potentially getting yourself killed. I would rather not have money than have our kids grow up without a father, you know? And it's like, but what's so wrong about our lives being the way it is? And it's just, he didn't really take time to explain, like, right, I just don't want our kids growing up like I did, just like, you know, just barely making ends meet. It's not like, oh, we're doing good, and, you know, we're living like a middle class. It's like, no, we're barely scraping by, and it's like, you know, that's a tough position, you know, considering his upbringing. Like, he doesn't want to repeat that cycle. So, but she's like, right, but for you to go on your like Suriname like adventures, you'd have to shut down your businesses, and then what? So I guess you make lemonade out of lemons, because the moment like someone was starting shit at his business and he was like, oh, let me call the cops. But one of them was a cop and one of them was like a politician or something like that. So it's like, cool. You want to issue? Well, like, oh, we'll shut this place down. We were trying to be super nice to you, but like, don't worry, we'll shut this place down. And I guess for him, it's almost like I guess you kind of, you know, I can't really say anything. It's just like, cool, I lucked out. Well, I've unintentionally put myself in a position where it's like, when like they were already threatening to shut the place down when the cop like put his hands and was threatening Ingu, and Ingu kind of laid the cop down on his ass with a judo throw. So I'm curious, was he already kind of go like, oh, I might as well go balls to the wall, like, who cares? Or did he just go like, I was like, well, it's already happening, who cares? Or was it just like, oh, let me add more insult to injury because now I will have no choice but to shut the place down, and now I'll have no choice because I have no other income, so I have to do this, or it's like damn, I have no other income, so I have no choice but to do it. I'm curious, not 100% clear on what his mindset is, because he's almost like, he's a little apologetic, but I feel like considering the circumstances, you would probably be a lot more apologetic, but it was just kind of, he was like, yeah, sorry, and he just seems so like, okay, just went with it so easily that I'm like, he probably used it, and I'm leaning more towards, I think he used it as an excuse, but I feel like it's not clear which way you could read Ingu's like position on that. So, and I love the whole him and Young-Soo's like back and forth, because it's like, oh, like he's like, I'm the one that knows all the business and stuff, you don't really, because he's like, because they had talked about this Suriname, like this place being so multicultural, multilingual, like there are so many people from so many different backgrounds in this one place, and I forgot what it was. He found out something about this. Oh yeah, he was like, right, Suriname is a country that participated in the Korean War, and he was like, wait, they participate? Young-Soo was like, wait, they participate in the Korean War? He's like, why would they? And he's like, see, you don't know everything. Like, you're acting like what you setting yourself up to be like a tour guide here? And I love that he's like, oh, you might not know, like, I don't know about everything else, but Young-Soo was like, I'm better than you at math. He's like, no, you're not. Are you drunk because you're misremembering things? He's like, all right, what was it? What's 8 times 7? He's like, what? What's 8 times 7? And he's like, I'm not about to do this. Like, yeah, no, go ahead. You should be able to do it. He's like, well, I'm driving. He's like, well, you should be able to multitask. It's simple. What is 8 times 7? I was like, that's such a dick move. But he's like, yeah, I can't multitask at the same time. It's like, okay. I do love that they bring that around later. He's like, 8 times 7 is like 56. It's like, oh, so you did. So you've been studying. He's like, I knew it the entire time, dick. I love their little back and forth that they have. But they find them, and I love that his wife is hounding him about like, oh, did you go to church? He's like, yeah, yeah. She's like, yeah, find a church and send me a picture of it, because like, once again, it's part of like their agreement about getting married was like you have to go to church every Sunday. So, and the skate business seems like it's going well. Everything did work out, because at first you felt like Young-Soo would be the type that would bumble the whole thing. He seems like he's a little bumbling, but it's like, oh, he came through in the end. So it's like, all right, we're making this work. And then like the government steps in. It's like, yo, you're gonna have to line our pockets for protection. And it's like, and then luckily Ingu was able to kind of set things up, and I love that he gave him like that Korean traditional coffee, and it's like, oh, it's bitter and sweet, and Ingu's like a woman, and you're like, oh, he's like, I think we're going to be good friends. I was like, okay, because I was scared. I was like, oh, this is about to get tense, but it's like, oh no, he's good at resolving stuff. It's like, oh, so that worked out cool. They got the government's protection and say so. It's like, all right, this is awesome. But then they get like a larger order they have to deal with, but it's like, well, they're going to get a lot of money for it. And I love that they're going off and celebrating Young-Soo, like partying it up at the club, dancing his little butt off. But the problem is, cool, like a Chinese gang rolls up on you like, no, you have to pay us too. It's like, well, what's the point of paying the government? It's like, oh yeah, the government's going to protect you on the land. This gang has the sea that you're going through. Yeah, that's our territory, so you're going to have to pay us $5,000 a month. So I think he was able to whittle the government down to like 1,000, because they're going to basically be getting like 8,000 per like their situations, like every like shipment and stuff like that. So it's like, oh, like, so it's like that's really going to cut into their bottom line. They're not going to make much in the end of it all, especially if they're paying protection from 2 separate people and they're kind of getting robbed. And then he also got that like shit beat out of them. So that super sucks. But Ingu being like, hey, trying to be the trying to be Mr. Silvertongue, trying to like sweet talk this situation. Like, hey, could we get a discount? And the guy, was it Chen Zin? Is like, no, you're going to pay us some money or I would kill you. So they ultimately ended up going to a church just for one, because it's like, right, to get his wife off his back a little bit. And it's like, all right, take a picture of me. It's like, wait, can you see the bruises? And it's like, yeah, I don't want her to worry. Okay, take a picture of me praying. Take a picture of me praying, but like get further, like a little back so you could get other people in the picture too. I'm like, okay. And just when they were leaving, the pastor, Gion puts them on the spot, and they kind of introduce themselves to the congregation, and the pastor wants to hear about their circumstances, and he's like, "Oh man, that sucks. What happened to you?" They're like, "Well, we'll give you a tribute, for a contribution for like helping us." He's like, "No. Money isn't why I do what I do. It's basically following the God's words." And the fact is that Pastor Gion kind of just like rolls up in a gang's territory like that, and even Cheng being like, "Yo, you stay to your territory and I'll stay to mine." We kind of made, and it's like the pastor's kind of rolling up with what looks kind of like a gang of his own. That I'm like, Ingu and Young-soo aren't thinking anything of this. I guess they're just thinking like, right, he's a powerful pastor, and it's like, well, I mean, I guess, because we know, criminals have even their things, like some criminals can be religious, and, they have like, it's like, right, we don't want no smoke with the church or anything like that. So, maybe that's what they just simply allocate that as, but he kind of smoothed things over, and and I love that, what was it, Mr. Byron, I like his loose translations to what, because the pastor was saying things in a very like dignified way, and Byron was like kind of like rough translating it to like, and he added some spice to it when he was translating it. So I think that was in. Because, I mean, I don't know how much Ingu could understand that, what they were, because it was going from Korean to Chinese, so I don't know if he obviously he knows English, but I don't know if he knows any Chinese, so he probably didn't even catch some of that smoke being thrown, so some of that probably went over both of their heads, because Young-soo doesn't even understand, he doesn't understand English at all, it's just something only Ingu does, so everything kind of worked out. We found out a little bit more about the pastor, that he has a lot of connections to politicians and the president. They even call him like the president. No, or is it the governor of Suriname? Because, and they say he might even run for president. Which there was that interesting line from Ingu where he was like, "Would you vote for a Chinese or someone Chinese or Mexican?" And I was like, I get what he's saying. It's like, right, considering this place, like, would they really even vote for a Korean guy? But, Young-soo brings up the fact is it's such a multicultural place that like so many people from, once again, so many backgrounds live here that there's actually a good chance he would win. Because it was the whole thing of like, because the comparison Ingu was almost making like, right, if we were back at home, would we vote for, back in Korea, like, would we vote for someone that was, would someone Chinese or Mexican even get a decent amount of votes? It was just that absurd to him, but it's like, no, because he's done a lot for the community and stuff like that, so he has that power and pull, so. I even love, it's like, cool, we're going to send him over some of the skates, and we're also going to give him like a very nice bottle of like alcohol that you haven't. Young-soo was like, yeah, my wife got that for me so that when I get back, come back home alive and we can try with our second child. It's like, yeah, you could have like your second or third child later, but come on, like if we lay the groundwork now, this could benefit us in the long run. So how they kind of convinced him. But I love even later on, he still didn't give him the bottle. He still cheaped out and didn't give him. It's like, I promised him we'll get the bottle. So, but sadly, their shipment of skates got stopped and was at Aruba because, oh, cool, there was a whole shit ton of cocaine stuffed inside. It's like, whoa, where could that come from? So Young-soo is calling up the pastor, and the pastor's like, oh, I'll do what I can to help. And then he kind of looks a little stressed, and then he's calling someone up. And so it's like, okay, so did the pastor set you up? Was he being okay with all that, or was it the government doing that? Like, who stuffed your skates full of cocaine? I'm assuming it's the pastor being like, well, it's all in Aruba. Well, that sucks. And like, I guess he was going to arrest them because for the cops to roll up on, I mean, I guess it's like the guy that was shipping who was taking the skates on the boat to Korea, who got interrogated for 5 days. Maybe he sold Ingu out because they went looking for Ingu. But once again, that was all after the pastor made a call. So the question is, did he throw them under the bus? Was that him calling about something else? Is the cocaine his? Because yeah, he might be one of those. He might be one of those bad people that presents. It's like, oh, you present yourself as a good guy when in actuality you are like probably like a very big time criminal. Just fronting yourself as like this, like charitable person, a pastor in particular, which how even more sinful about it. But I think that's where the titling of it, because I didn't get that from the title, that the trailer. To be fair, it's been a little while, but I didn't know that the gang that Ingu's going to get involved with, I didn't know it was tied to this pastor. Maybe not. Maybe like I said, I watched one trailer and it's been a while, so maybe I'm not remembering it as well. But nevertheless, I was worried that the moment the cops rolled up, I thought that was more so about. I was like, oh my god, Young-soo, he got killed or something, didn't he? It was like Chin or whatever, like ended up killing him. I thought that's what that was about, but like no, they rolled up on him, which. Your boy Ingu tried his best to run away, tossing some cops away, running. Kind of made me think of like the opening to Sleeping Dogs. Like watching this, I'm like, oh, I'm definitely getting like some Sleeping Dog vibes from this to some extent. So, but he ultimately ends up getting caught. So I think this is where we really kind of get into what the meat and potatoes of the story really ends up being. But once again, we had to do a lot of like groundwork setting up the story of understanding how we get to where we had, because it's one of those. I always blank on the phrase. It's in res media in res media when you kind of start at the ending or middle and then like rewind to the beginning. So. It's going to be interesting to see. Now I think we have better context for like the circumstances of how, because the trailer kind of makes it seem like somehow this entrepreneur found his way here. It's like, oh, he got accidentally mixed up in this drug game, and now it's like, I guess to like avoid any charges, and it's like, right, you're kind of in the middle of all this, so you're going to be our inside person. I wonder who, like, is it the who's actually running the op, like police wise? Like, is it the Suriname, like, police or government kind of cracking down on this, or what other, like, police entity is coming to Ingu to do this? And what about Young-soo, like, where is he at? Because he was going to go check on, like, the workers and stuff and find out, like, how did this all happen? Not unless he knows what was what, and he kind of kept Ingu in the dark and played dumb about, oh, how could this, the coke and everything. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. Just the first episode, but I'm very interested to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.